Welcome back to the Fostering Financial Victories podcast. My name is Eric, your host. Thanks for joining us again. I am joined today by Dr. Brian Thurston.
Thanks for having me.
So this will be a fun conversation.
Should be good.
Thanks for spending some time with us. I know you got a busy schedule.
My pleasure.
So Brian, you came to our office a couple months ago and gave a talk on feedback.
Yep.
Right. It kind of sounds a little bit unique coming from a surgeon.
Yeah. Right.
But I thought it was very impactful for our team, and we wanted to invite you on and have you kind of share your story and how you got to where you are now and how you kind of evolved into, a speaker of some sort, man.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Kind of give a little bit of background of what you do on a daily basis, kind of what your real day job is.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. So this is good feedback to my talk on feedback.
Yeah.
So, good experience for us both here. So, my name is Dr. Brian Thurston. I'm a trauma surgeon by training, and my real job is I run the Level 1 Trauma Center at Spartanburg Regional in Spartanburg, South Carolina. One of the things that, in addition to running a Level 1 Trauma Center, is we train surgery residents, so sort of the next generation. And one of the things that we learned real quick about trauma and about training surgeons is, communication matters and feedback matters. And you're constantly giving and receiving feedback, really in the world, but certainly in our line of work. And a lot of times it's pretty high stakes, pretty time sensitive. And you're trying to accomplish some real immediate short-term goals and also some long-range goals. And sometimes those are overlapping. And so how to do that better has become kind of a passion of mine, largely through, they say wisdom is learned through failure. So, happy to share a fair amount of those with you. And really, ended up putting together a talk on feedback. Have given this now a couple times in a couple different venues, obviously one to your practice. And happy to be on the show and sort of have an ongoing dialogue about it.
Yeah. So the few things that stuck out to me as we listened to you give your discussion with us was just the directness. Just being very direct. Don't sugarcoat things. Whatever you want, say it.
Right.
And I think we fall into that dilemma of not wanting to hurt somebody's feelings, or not wanting to offend someone as they ask us our opinion of it, and it kind of misleads a lot of people.
It's the pitfall, right? And I think the easiest way to think about this is like, everything from being a customer at a restaurant to having an interpersonal relationship on a date,
right.
Whatever. Ironically, probably one of the places I learned about this the most has been in relationship therapy, in the sense that, you got to learn to ask for what you want and say what you want. And, the more time sensitive or high stakes the situation, the more direct you have to be. And I think a lot of people quickly, your mindset can shift, and you can imagine like a military situation or something like that. And that makes a little bit of a sense of there's an established chain of command, and I'm giving you an order, and it's not a dialogue and those types of things. And so, one of the things we mess up is we either don't learn to ask for what we want, or we prioritize like the efficiency and the harshness with it, in the sense that we're doing it this way, period, end of discussion, and you sever the relationship. And you can't have both. Right. And the reality is as much as we would like to pretend that we're these, lone wolves and these isolated, silos in this world, we're not. We depend on everything. We were talking before the mic started rolling. I'd be sunk without my team, professionally and in life. And I'd like to think that they maybe think the same thing about me. But I depend on them, and we depend on each other. And so how we give and receive that feedback is just so critical. But you got to learn to say what you want. There's really only two ways to try to interact with another human being, right? One is you can ask for something, or two is you can try to manipulate them or extort them or demand it, from them. Yeah. And that's it, right? I mean, you can't force someone to love you, to like you, to give you money, to do what you want, right? You can entice them to do it. You can threaten them to do it, but that's really about it. And so learning how to do that and not have them hate you in the process is it's a challenge.
Try to keep the relationship there.
Exactly, right?
So you have young kids?
I do, yeah.
All right, so how old are they?
6 and 3.
Okay, so have you started to employ some of this to them?
I really have, in the sense that, a lot of times it's, hey, I'm asking you to do this. Hey, will you do this? Hey, what will it take to get you to do this? This is what I want from you. This is what I need from you. This is why. And it's interesting because you learn different situations require different level of explanations. I mean, and we, surgery also kind of brings this out of me is there are definite situations where it's literally, I mean, you're like, no, don't do that. Don't cut that. Don't stick that. Don't put that stitch there. Right.
Yeah.
That's the akin of, don't run out in the street, or, don't put your hand on the stove. over, or don't do that. I guess in your world, it would be don't execute that trade, or,
don't panic.
Don't panic, right? And so there are things that require some immediacy, and those require, a different level of action and feedback to some other things of, hey, like, I want you to do this, or I need you to do this. In my experience, a lot of those, the bigger asks, the longer term asks, the bigger picture, if you will, they require the why. And you have to be able to say, like, I want this from you. I need this from you. Here's why. Here's what I'm looking for. And then you got to kind of see what they're going to say to that, right? Whether it's a quick Roger that, or yes, Dad, or yes, sir, or okay, or I can't do that, or I can do that if you'll do this for me, or I'm going to need this in order to give you that. And that's where I say, feedback, we often think about feedback as what I'm telling you, but I also think feedback is equally important, if not more, is what I'm hearing you tell me.
So with the buy-in, essentially, of are you going to actually buy in on the why?
Right.
And trying to figure out if that registers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most impactful things I ever had was early on in my career, one of the residents came into my office and is like, I know you've hammered me on this and I just can't get my head around it. I want to do it, but I have to know the why. And I was like, man, thank you. Right. That is incredibly powerful feedback for me of like, I'm failing in delivering this message if I haven't communicated the why and why it's important.
So how did that end up going from there?
Yeah. So, we have a great relationship. But what I found is, if you're delivering a message and you have some time to put some thought behind it, and a lot of times in our worlds we do, right? Especially in our professional worlds, we love to live in the world of evaluations, right? And evaluations are just a professional organization's term for feedback, right?
Right.
And we love to live in those worlds, and so when you have some time to put some thought behind it, saying, this is the why, right? And sometimes we don't like the whys, right? This is the other problem. Hey, why are we doing this? To make more money, right? Why are we doing this? Well, because this actually makes my life easier. Why are we doing this? Because this annoys me. Why are we doing this? Because I don't like the fact that you're wearing flip-flops into the office, right?
I wonder if you were going to go to there, because that was one story you brought up during our group talk that, it sounds ludicrous.
Yeah.
But I could see it.
Oh no, it was, and it's funny because being in the middle of it, it felt ludicrous, right? Is so, to set the stage, right, just briefly. So I get called to my boss's office about the professionalism of our group,
right?
And I get this really vague talk about we need people to be more professional, and we have a standard to uphold and an image, and you're all high six-figure earners, and you're professionals, and it's I'm sitting there nodding, yes, I get it. I need you to be more professional, and I'm just like. So, we go back and we talk in our group, right? Hey, man, word came down from above, got to be more professional. And we're all like, what does that mean? Do I have to be clean shaven? Do I have to wear a tie? Do I have to be 5 minutes early? Do I have to have a pressed and starched white coat? Do I need to, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, right? Like refer to everybody by their, doctor this, nurse
you can interpret
this.
that a lot of different ways.
What does that mean, right? Like, I don't know what that means. Well, it turns out one of the biggest offenses was, one of my partners was wearing flip-flops. And he would literally walk from the parking lot to his office in flip-flops, change into scrubs, go about his day. And I mean, this is the guy who's like on the short list of people who get to operate on me if I'm dying.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, like,
pretty good.
This is a good surgeon, good guy, right? Like, after several frustrating sort of like, what is this really about? Because we tried to implement some change and it didn't work, and tried to implement some change and it didn't work, and finally we're able to go have the off the record conversation of, hey, this is what's pissing people off,
right?
And then I so that was great. On one hand it's like this light bulb moment, and now it's on this other hand if I gotta sit this person who's my friend right down and be like, all right, dude, like here's the this is all semi BS, and like you just can't wear flip-flops, and I mean I bet I had to hear about that for 3 to 6 months.
Just think if you'd have known it on the first go around.
Yeah. Well,
you wouldn't have to just guess.
It was one of the things that sparked me in terms of putting this talk together for my organization and doing this, is because the ludicrousy of that, right? Because invariably I started thinking about, so how many people, because it didn't necessarily offend my boss. It had to offend my boss's boss, right? So it had to go down the chain and then back up the chain, when, like, how nice would it have been to just be like, hey, man, like, we love you. You're great here. Please don't wear flip-flops to the office. Even if the answer is we just plain don't like it, and for what we're paying you, we get to say that.
Right.
The answer could have been like, nah, I'm kind of okay with that. Because ultimately that's what happened. It took, a year and a bunch of hurt feelings.
Trying to figure out what the guess game was.
So again, and that to me was, and that's a funny story, right?
Oh yeah.
But that was really one of the seminal moments behind how to put this together.
But how many other times does that happen in day-to-day life with coworkers, with families, with you name it? Yeah. And it may not be something like that, but it may be something very similar to that. You're like, what? This is really the biggest deal?
Yeah.
But they didn't know.
Right. They didn't know. Right. And one of the things I've learned about myself in examining all of that is like, it felt awkward for me to go and say that, they don't want you to wear. I even felt the need, even doing that, to be like, whoa, hey man, this isn't coming from me. Right. This is coming from them. Right. And so that caused me to really self-examine, why are we uncomfortable to say, this is what I'd like from you? This is what I want from you. This is what I'm looking for from you. This is what I need from you. But we are, right? Whether it's, I'm married, right? And one of the things that, the dinner fight, right? What do you want for dinner? I don't know. Gosh. You can have anything. Well, how about Italian food? No. How about Mexican? No, right?
You said anything.
You said anything. I just threw out two options. And I mean, before you know it, and everybody who's married is laughing at this, right? Or everybody who's been in a relationship.
Well, I have 4 kids, so I'm laughing inside a lot because it's a constant battle.
Right.
Because they all want something different. 6 of us.
Right. And so, even just getting to that, right? So to the point where it's like, I got to get to the point where I can, call or text and say, I would like to order Thai food tonight. What do you think? Right. I realize how innately hard that is for me. And this is over something that has of almost no consequence in the world. And so when you start thinking about stuff that might have consequence, some of the harder conversations, I need you to be better at your job. I need you to, not speak to people in that tone. I need you to take a pay cut, or I'm not going to be able to give you a pay raise, or I need you to take a different job. Or, even, and those are just mediums, right? The really hard ones, right? Like, I need this relationship to end, whether it's personal, or I need us not to be business partners anymore, or I need to go out and do my own thing, or, this isn't what you want to hear, but like, I need to tell you this. I'm not doing my fiduciary responsibility if I'm telling you this, or I know this is what you want to do, but that's not legal, or that's pushing the boundaries of what's ethical, or in my line of work, the other one too, right? The other one that really, cemented this, and not to get too sidetracked, right, but doctors are like the worst in the world at having the conversation with patients and families of like, this is going really bad. Your loved one is probably going to die, right? We don't know how to say that, right? We dance around. We use all these euphemisms around all these bad things. Yeah. And so really learning to integrate that and embrace the uncomfortableness of this is the information that I need to deliver in order to see this try to move forward in a way that is salvageable is difficult. And
do you think that's just society's innate desire to not want to offend anybody? You think that's what it is?
I think it's, I think anything in life that is worth having and doing is going to make us uncomfortable. I think that's where the good fruit is.
Oh yeah, that's where you grow.
And but we all love our comfort zone, right? If you think about just in general, right, the hierarchy of how we make decisions, right? Anticipation of pleasure, avoidance of pain, conservation of energy, right? Every mammalian brain is wired that way.
Right.
And so, we like our comfort zone, and we like, we want to avoid discomfort at all costs. And so, I think we are innately wired that way. I've also think, it's a nature and a nurture thing, right? Because again, I think you're, hey, don't offend them, right? I'm amazed too, right? How many of us, how many of us don't want to be told to eat better, to stop smoking, to drink more water, to sleep more, to work less, to exercise more?
Probably everybody that walks into your facility.
Right. Well, some of mine, get wheeled in. So, it's a different conversation. Yeah. Right.
That's fair.
But
That's trauma.
Right. And how many of your clients don't want to be told to save more money or allot money in different ways, or, hey, don't buy that boat, or don't buy that beach house?
A lot of them, because that's, it's pleasure.
Right.
Right. And you're right. The delayed gratification,
right,
is not easy to wrap your hands around.
Yeah. And even I find that delayed gratification is even easier to wrap your head around than unknown. Right. It's that real unknown that I think really scares people of, I don't know how you're going to react when I tell you this. Right. Because we want so much to, we avoid doing it because we play out this scenario in our head of, hey, if I give Eric this feedback, he's going to be mad at me and that's going to sever the relationship. So I'm not going to do it. Now the real truth is, if I give Eric this feedback, I don't know how you're going to react. And that's even scarier to embrace from my standpoint.
Yeah.
And so it's easier to, pretend like I know and avoid it than it is to because on some level I'm showing up vulnerable. Eric, I need this from you. Eric, I need you to hear this from me. Eric, I want this from you. Eric, you're not going to like what I have to say, but it's still true.
Still got to hear it.
Still got to hear it.
Yeah.
Right.
So what have you noticed with the resident group that since you've started employing some of these tactics for your organization, how has this changed it, or has it?
So I've noticed a fundamental shift from, and I was full disclosure, I was a resident in that organization, so I have historical memory going back to 2008, and it's really interesting to grow up in a place, go away for a little while, come back, and then take on a leadership role. I've gotten to see, I feel like somebody who started as the janitor in an organization and is risen through administration.
You've seen all the wrinkles.
Seen all the wrinkles. I know where all the back stairwells are, and how to avoid the cameras, if you will. But the biggest thing is it's a culture shift, right? From when I was coming through, I felt like as a med student and as a resident, I felt like resident education was largely viewed as you're in basic training in the military. You're low on the totem pole. It's a hierarchical. Do what I tell you to, and that was a lot of what I experienced coming through, right?
Sure.
And in the sense that membership has its privileges, and you're not a member, right? And you got to sort of earn it. And I think there's still a lot to that, right? You got to do the work. You got to pay your dues. You can't cheat the grind. Whatever.
Outside looking in for a little while.
Whatever euphemism you want to use, you can't get away from any of that. But what I have seen and what I started experiencing is there were one or two really good mentors who took the attitude of, you're an adult, you're a professional, you have chosen this really hard thing. I'm going to treat you like that. And our job isn't to tell you what to do. And our job isn't to spoon feed it to you. And our job isn't to make it comfortable for you. Our job is to give you opportunity and feedback and guidance. And the most helpful feedback in my career has never been the, hey, you did a great job with that. It's always been the, hey, this is where you struggled. And what I have found is the people that I remember the most and were most impactful were the ones who figured out a way to tell me what I didn't want to hear, in a way that I could still have a relationship with them. And there are lots of different ways, right? I had one who cut up a bunch of evaluations about me, like little fortune cookie segments, and let me just read written comments that had been submitted. And again, in that way, I couldn't assimilate where they were from or who they were from or whatever, but and it was, you just need to read these. And they're not coming from me, but you need to read these, right?
Sure.
Another one was, hey, we're friends and partners and we're going to be before and after this conversation, but like, for the next 5 minutes, you got to hear this. Like, you sucked here and here and here. And, if I know you and I know what your goals and ambitions are, and you're not going to get there unless you correct this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sucked.
So one other story you shared with us was, in regards to every resident class that comes through, there's always somebody who gets to read a book.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk through that a little bit?
So that was one of my partner's ideas, and it's turned out to be brilliant, right? Is we figured out that, for those of you who don't know, surgery residency is brutal, right? So it's 80 hours a week, and you are doing, it is hard labor, right? And we were chatting right before this started, right? For every moment that you would see on ER or Grey's Anatomy, and there's an occasional one of those. There's 9,000 moments that just absolutely suck and are not glamorous and are just exhausting.
Makes you wonder, why did I do this?
I mean, if you don't question why you're doing that a million times as in surgical training, then you're probably not a sane person. And so invariably, people have unpleasant interactions, right? They get tired, they get hungry, they get angry, they get lonely, they get sad, they get sick, they get, you have these, if my pager goes off one more time, I'm going to throw it across the room. And invariably you throw that pager at somebody, or you say something that you shouldn't have, and and this is a predictable pattern, right? And one of my partners had this brilliant idea of, well, instead of just calling these kids in and admonishing them and sort of trying the sandwich method, if you will, of we love you and you're great and you sucked at this but we still love you, or you can't, that just wasn't working, right? It just, I mean, for lack of a better term, the shit sandwich method was shit,
right?
I mean,
it wasn't resonating.
It wasn't resonating. And so we ended up reading this book, and it's very well known, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? And it was very impactful for us, right? Especially some of the anecdotes in there about, particularly Abraham Lincoln would write these like scathing letters and then never send them to his generals, right? And they only discovered them years later, and it was impactful in the sense that how to manage high stress situations and that kind of stuff. And so we the first time this happened with the new resident class, we called the first offender in, and instead of giving them a lecture, we're like, congratulations, like you're the winner. And they're like, of what? And we're like, well, this year, the first one of you to get written up by the nursing staff instead of getting in trouble is going to get to read this book and give a report to the rest of your colleagues on what you learned reading this book. And it was met with eye rolling and everything else. Now full disclosure, it has been great, right?
Yeah.
And the first person that we did this on has actually now been employed to come back as a heart surgeon in our organization. So had a lot of impactful meaning. And now it's become almost a running theme in the sense that every year now the residents are betting on which of the new class is going to get assigned the book.
Who it's going to be.
Yeah. But, it went from us spouting off these anecdotes or these stories or these things to now them really doing it themselves. And that's what I would say, it's been a culture shift in the sense that we are professionals, and professionals to thrive need a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
And how do we constantly give that to each other and yet maintain this relationship? Because, one of the other principles I think that really governs doing anything that requires a team approach, and I would say that that's your practice, that's our practice. I'm pressed to imagine a scenario where it doesn't matter. Your relationships matter just as much as your skill sets, maybe more.
I would say it might be more.
Yeah.
Yeah, because without that, you're floundering.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people can't, communication isn't what I'm saying, it's what you're hearing.
Right.
And more importantly, it's what you can do with what I'm giving you, and then what you can then give back to me so that we can both get better. Because I mean, that's the idea, right? It's easy to think of success and failure as individual things, but they're not. And it's, they say, success has, 1,000 contributors or 1,000 fathers, and failure's an orphan, right? I believe that, except in my mind, they're both. I mean, you succeed and fail as a group.
Yeah. I think one thing I heard growing up, my grandfather told me this a long time ago, was lessons learned hardest last the longest.
I totally agree with that.
And, that's at first when he told me that, it didn't sink in. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Right.
Like, this is just some sort of, poet type of thing.
Right.
But the more I've thought about it, it's so true.
Right.
When I failed, that's when I learned the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece is not being afraid to fail.
And I think as a leader, your ability to both give feedback and then I think hear back, right?
Yeah.
So again, one of the most, when I think back to my professional failings, one of the most impactful moments was, hey, you did this and it's not okay.
Right.
And there wasn't any argument about that, right? And I think a lot of high functioning professionals, you don't have to tell them that they messed up. They innately know.
Sure.
But it was the follow-up conversation. Okay, so that's not okay. We've addressed that. Like, I trust that you're going to address that. But now tell me what was actually going on, right? That put you in this position where that was the choice you decided to make.
Sure.
And then having someone who's willing to have that conversation with you, all of a sudden makes it much more likely that that's not really going to happen again, because A, you're taking this feedback and integrating it, and B, they're getting feedback of how they can put you in a position to be successful more often.
Yeah, it's a win.
It's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
But it's uncomfortable.
Usually. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Right. Yeah.
It's still going to be uncomfortable.
Right.
For both people.
Exactly.
So, all right. So is there one thing that you would give as a takeaway to business owner, family unit? Like, what would be one thing that you could say, if you guys could just take this piece out of this conversation, you'd be in a better spot?
Yeah. I would say learn to ask for what you want, first of all, and learn to embrace the discomfort behind it. And then I would say the follow-up to that, though, is the mnemonic think, right? So I have this feedback for you, but I'm going to think about it first, right? Is it thoughtful? Is it honest? Is it important? Is it necessary? And is it as kind as can be, right? And if you can deliver feedback, what you want, what you need, meeting those objectives, I think you're going to be surprised at the way that you get that back.
So don't be so knee-jerk reaction.
Reactionary is almost always bad.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the don't stick a knife right there. Don't put your hand on the stove. I get that, right? And yes, that's a very small percentage of things. But the reality is, most of the time, you have time to think about what you're asking or needing to say to these people, and you should do that.
Very cool. Well, man, I'm gonna stop us right here. I know you got a busy rest of your day.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you for spending time with us, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yep.
Brian, one thing, man. We have always asked the same 2 questions to everybody who has been on here. What's the last thing you spent money on?
Christmas presents for my kids.
Okay, don't tell them what it is.
Yep.
Second one is, if you could buy anything in the world, regardless of cost, what would it be?
A Gulfstream.
Nice. That was easy to answer.
Yeah.
All right, that's to get you on the speaking circuit. Guys, if you've got questions or feedback on topics that you'd like for us to discuss, you can reach us on our website at fostervictor.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at Foster Victor Wealth Advisors. Okay, thanks again, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.
Stay safe and warm.
Information contained in this podcast was intended for general use, not to be used as specific advice. For content tailored to your personal situation, please contact one of our wealth coaches.